Throughout the year, CET is examining one of Cincinnati's most pressing education issues, the high school dropout problem. Tonight on Focus, we'll take a look at the Campaign for Grade-Level Reading, a new effort to address the dropout crisis by focusing on early learning. This special episode of Focus is part of the Public Media Initiative, American Graduate. Let's make it happen. Hello, I'm Kathy Lehr. Communities across the country are addressing what is clearly a national crisis. 2 out of every 3 United States fourth graders are not proficient readers, according to national assessment data. The picture is even worse for those living in poverty. More than 4 out of every 5 low-income students are not reading on grade level. Students who haven't mastered reading by the 4th grade are more likely to get stuck in a cycle of academic failure, drop out of school, and struggle throughout their lives. But Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky have joined together in a new collaborative effort to improve early reading skills. More than 70 regional leaders have come together to launch the Campaign for Grade-Level Reading. Here with me today are 3 leaders in that effort. Greg Landsman, Executive Director of the Strive Partnership of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. Stephanie Bird, Executive Director of the United Way's Success by 6, and Polly Lusk-Page, Executive Director of the Northern Kentucky Education Council. Thank you all for joining with us today.
Good to be here.
Based on the statistics, what do we know about the dropout crisis when it comes to early learning?
Well, there's obviously a gap in terms of who's dropping out and who's graduating from high school, and for the most part that's based on income, and the statistics nationally are not so different locally, although Cincinnati public has done fairly well over the last couple of years. But if you start to look back and figure out when the moment was that some of this the point of departure was really around early reading and success or failure. So, for example, if a child is reading successfully by the end of 3rd and 4th grade, meaning they're reading at grade level, they're much more likely to graduate. We teach reading up until 3rd grade, and then starting in the 4th grade, we pull back on a lot of that curriculum, expecting kids at that point to know how to read in order to learn. And so it's a tough transition for kids if they're not reading successfully by that point. So for kids that aren't reading successfully by the end of 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out. This is national data. If they're not reading successfully by the end of 3rd grade and they're low income, they're 13 times more likely to drop out. And if they live in an area of concentrated poverty, which a lot of low income students do, they're 17 times more likely to drop out. So if you can help a child get to the point where they're reading successfully by the end of 3rd grade and then carry that success through the 4th grade, statistically speaking, they're going to graduate from high school and go off to some form of post-secondary education.
How is this measured?
So we, both states, in Ohio and in Kentucky, students take a state assessment to determine where they are from a literacy standpoint. And you know, they're assessed throughout the year, but there's one test that they take at the end of the year, which is what we're looking at in terms of 3rd and 4th grade reading rates.
Tell me a little bit about this collaboration that exists between Ohio and Kentucky leaders.
Go on, Stephanie. Sure. Well, in the area of early childhood, we have worked for a number of years now across state lines to really improve kindergarten readiness, looking at what strategies are going to be most effective in making sure that children are prepared for kindergarten. It has been an effort that has included United Way, the school districts, partners in the early childhood education field, and those individuals who are providing services in the homes of these families who can benefit most from having a more intensive level of service. And so it's a collective effort. It takes more than an individual agency to reach some of the more difficult to reach families and to make sure that these children's needs are identified and addressed. in a multidimensional way. And so we have worked for many years to look not only at the language development and literacy needs of children, but also the social and emotional needs of children, because all of those come together to really make for a ready child.
Are we doing a better job, say, going back than to where we were 10 years ago?
Oh, I definitely think our children are much more ready for kindergarten than they were years ago. And it really is, as Stephanie is alluding to, it's about a system that we're building. So it's not just the early childhood community alone. Now it's an entire system of getting all of these children ready. And it also comes down to, I believe, opportunity and access for all of our children. And so that's what we're really, all three of us and leading our efforts are looking at, that opportunity and access for all of our children.
When it comes to the dropout rate, what are we seeing in Ohio and Kentucky? Is it different? Is it about the same?
I know our percentages, of course, and we're also, when we talk about dropout, we also have to think about graduation rate, because we do have, in Northern Kentucky, we've been drilling down just for our 6 counties, we have about 23% of our students who are unaccounted for, that they're not graduating on time. And that doesn't mean that they didn't graduate somewhere else, but we maybe have lost track of them, or if they haven't officially dropped out. So we do have a significant population of students that we're losing through the cracks somewhere.
Yeah, and I think the same is true in Cincinnati. However, over the last couple of years, at least for Cincinnati Public, they've seen a pretty significant spike in their graduation rates, which is the combination of any number of things, including the transformation of their high schools and making their high schools, each of them, a high school of choice, meaning that you can pick which high school you want to go to, and each one had unique programming, and that, I think, that helped to engage students on a different level. But in the end, we know that the key to sustainable success from a high school graduation rate standpoint starts very early. If a child, and this is the work that Stephanie and the United Way and Success by 6 and others are leading on both sides of the river, if a child enters kindergarten prepared, meaning that they had the kinds of experiences and supports that Stephanie talked about, there's an assessment that each take when they get to kindergarten. If they do well on that assessment, they know their colors, they know their shapes, they know the alphabet, et cetera, they're going to be much more likely to succeed, especially as it relates to early literacy, right? Those are the kids that are going to be reading at grade level by the end of 3rd and 4th grade, especially if we can keep them in school, and for some students, make sure that they have an extended school experience or some summer learning experience, so whatever gains that they make during the school year, they don't lose them in between school years, which is what happens to a lot of low-income kids. But again, if you can get to the point where a child is entering kindergarten successfully for a whole host of based on a whole host of strategies that Stephanie and others are leading, and then make sure they attend school, have access to quality summer learning experiences, they're reading successfully by the end of 3rd grade. Statistically speaking, those are the kids that are going to graduate from college and go off to college, high school, and go off to some form of college. And that is what's so significant in terms of our collective success as a region, whether or not we're going to have the sort of talent that we need to be competitive. And a lot of it rests on this issue of early literacy.
I was going to ask you, what in terms of the economic impact that a high dropout rate has on a community. Can you speak to that?
Well, we know that children who have a high quality early learning experience are more likely to be able to read on grade level by the time they're in the 3rd grade and go on to graduate from high school. And so we're very, very focused on making sure that their first experience in school is a successful one, because that is a predictor of what they're going to be able to do in the 3rd grade and beyond. And we have concentrated our efforts on really knowing what that child is doing in the preschool years as a way of intervening early and helping teachers and helping parents identify whatever needs a child might have, so that all of their issues can be addressed, course corrected, and they're in a better position to be prepared in a early language development and literacy perspective, so that they get on the right trajectory when they get into kindergarten, because those early years are so predictive of what happens in the future. There have been numerous economic impact studies done across the country by the Federal Reserve Bank and economists that show that when a child has that high quality early learning experience, they're more likely to graduate, they're more likely to earn incomes that are self-sustaining, they're more likely to give back to their communities. And all of those have been factored into return on investment kinds of calculations that show that there is a huge return when we invest early. And unfortunately, in this country, the investment curve is just the inverse of what the brain development curve is. And so we need to look more at how we invest early so that we can get that return in the earlier years.
What about when it comes to the absenteeism rate among young people? How does that play into all of this?
Well, I think the chronic absenteeism, we realize we can monitor how often students are absent, but then we want to really look, and this is part of our plan, to look at children who are chronically absent and what are the root causes of that chronic absenteeism. You know, I don't believe that any teacher or parent, anyone gets up in the morning and says, well, you know what, I'm just going to do a really bad job parenting or teaching today. So other influences come into play, and oftentimes many of our districts don't have the health services that they require to help these children and get to some of these root causes. So this is something we're looking at the landscape across both Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky to say, what is it that we need to do better, and what resources do we need to do this work?
We you know, the old adage is that you end up working on what you measure, right? And so at the moment we measure in both states and across the country school level attendance rate. Right. So a school will have an attendance rate of something like 95%, even though in many of those schools anywhere between 20, 30, and in some instances 40% of the students are missing more than 10% of the school year, which is considered to be that student is considered to be chronically absent. And those students, we did a lot of data work as we were putting the plan together. Kids that are chronically absent are much less likely to be reading successfully by the end of 3rd and 4th grade than kids that are attending regularly. And so part of our challenge is to start to measure not only school level attendance rates, which will tell you one thing, but what is the chronic absentee rate at a particular school, and using the kinds of data systems that we're working with the districts to help build. Who are those students, and are we getting them the supports that they need? I mean, that's the kind of intelligence that we're going to have to get really good at if we're going to see profound changes in terms of kids getting to school every day.
And the measures that Greg is talking about, while applicable certainly in the elementary ages, are also evident in the early years. And so the earlier we identify patterns that would indicate that a child is going to have an attendance problem, and work with that parent to understand how attending benefits the child and has better outcomes for the child, the better off we are. And our data would show consistently that a child who is in the classroom 95% of the time or more does much, much better than his or her peer that is there only 90% of the time. And so that small, 5 percentage point change has a significant impact on whether or not that child is going to be ready from the standpoint of language development and early literacy. So it's having the right interventions, identifying the child at the child level, understanding what the issues are surrounding that absenteeism, and working with the family to make sure that they understand and have supports if necessary to address those issues.
So you've talked about the collaboration the agencies have. You've got to also have that parental buy-in to get them invested, and then comes the question of how do you do that? How do you best go about that?
We all of us are partnering with a group called Read Aloud, which is an effort to encourage every parent, irrespective of income, to sit down with their child, their young children, every night for 15 minutes and read to them. I mean, this is a huge aspect of whether or not a child is going to be ready for school and reading successfully by the end of 3rd grade. If you're reading to your child every night for even 15 minutes, it's not just the child's going to hear words and get used to the book and all those important things, but it's the connection that the child makes with the parent that's really, really meaningful and will go a long way in terms of not just social emotional development, but brain development. I mean, that's the brain will, it's stimulated by those kinds of interactions. You know, that's part of, I think, the piece of this, and you know, you may, one of the major strategies of Stephanie's work is around home visitation. And
took the words out of my mouth.
yeah.
And I think part of it is making sure that the home setting is one where the child is hearing a lot of words and having a lot of stimulation. And you know, parents get very, very tired and busy and don't often think about how the small things that they do on a day-to-day basis can be turned into learning moments for their children. And we have, there's a program called Born Learning, and in Northern Kentucky, the Born Learning Academies have been fabulous in helping parents take everyday moments and turn them into learning moments for their children, whether it's when they're in the grocery store, or they're at home cooking dinner, or they're driving home from work, or even riding the bus to and from. Take that moment and make that moment a learning moment by talking to the child about what he or she is seeing. You know, what is the color of that sign? You know, what is the shape of that, you know, vegetable? And really making it fun, because not only are they stimulating the child's brain, they're also in developing their language skills, because they may not say the right thing, but they're saying something. And it's in that interaction, in that hearing the words and having robust communications going on in the home, that creates that, you know, that better ability to articulate and speak and express yourself. Our home visiting programs are very focused on language development and literacy. Every Child Succeeds, Hippie, Spark, there are so many programs in our community that touch on how the parent engages the child. Yeah. For young children, it's how you nurture and talk to the child. In the preschool ages, it's how you get the child to express themselves. And so there are very simple curricula and methods that parents can learn, and our goal is to get in the home and help them learn them.
And I would say, to Stephanie's point, she mentioned Born Learning Academies, and that programs like that, or initiatives like that, are what we hope to be able to bring to scale all across the region. And another opportunity we have in Northern Kentucky, it's called CIPL, it's the Commonwealth Institute for Parent Leadership. So yet again, involving those parents in a meaningful experience. It's an institution across a year for them. So it just gives us another avenue to work with parents.
And whether it's doing things like this and partnering with other you know, media outlets, and to the extent we can, actually doing some you know, community engagement with some funding that allows us to get in front of parents on billboards and on the radio and all these other things to talk about these really important you know, things that they ought to be thinking about. And many of them are. But you know, as Stephanie said, everyone's so busy, and if you know, at the very least, taking 15 minutes out of your day to sit down and read to your child will go, you know, can make all the difference in the world.
I think there is a sense that helping a child learn to read is a science, and that you have to be a very strong reader yourself. And you know, some parents aren't. Yeah. You know, they've had their own challenges as it relates to, you know, their own reading and literacy experiences. So our goal is to not focus on the strength of your own reading skills, but telling stories together, particularly in the early years. Telling stories and having the child answer your questions about what they see on the picture book, and not necessarily paying attention to every word that's on the page, because sometimes no words are necessary to help the child begin to express him or herself. And that's our focus with the Born Learning Academies and with the home visiting services. Have us tell stories and talk to your child and help them express themselves.
What is the campaign for grade level reading, and what are its goals?
So we, there's a national effort underway to recognize a whole host of communities that are launching multi-year campaigns to improve early reading success. And the STRIVE partnership teamed up with the Northern Kentucky Education Council. We're focused on the urban core of the region, Cincinnati and across the river, Newport and Covington. Polly and the Northern Kentucky Education Council they're focused on the 6 counties in Northern Kentucky and 18 school districts. And we thought, well, let's team up. Let's use this as an opportunity not only to compete nationally, say, hey, we got a great plan. It's an 8-year plan. It's based on collaborative action around the work that Stephanie and others lead to improve kindergarten readiness, around attendance, around summer learning, building strong, broad-based community will, et cetera. Let's team up and be part of this national competition and use that as a catalyst to get a campaign going here, which will be launched in phases over the course of the next 6 to 12 months.
Let's talk a little bit more about the summer learning. Why, how?
Well, why? Because it's important. I think Greg mentioned before about some children who experience what we call a summer slide. So if you're already behind and you aren't where you should be at the end of the school year, and then you don't have any more opportunity or access to bolster your skills during this summer, we do see what we call this summer slide. So you come back to school in the fall even less prepared, perhaps, than when you left at the end of the year. So we are currently trying to determine what are some best practice programs out there, what do they look like, and doing a landscape survey for all of us about what's even available right now, what do we need, and what would be a consistent opportunity for all of our students.
What's so significant about sort of what we've learned over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, and just in terms of pulling this together, is what people across the country now know, that if you look at the high school graduation gap, right, it's primarily based on income. That gap started not in 9th grade or 10th grade or 11th grade. It started very early on, and so children that show up to kindergarten prepared, middle-class students will show up to kindergarten prepared at, say, this level, and low-income children show up at this level, and perhaps you have really good, a great kindergarten experience and a good first grade experience, and maybe things even out. And then what will happen is that that low-income child will still lose a couple months during the summer, where the middle-class child, because of the experiences they'll have access to during the summer, will either stay where they are or even move up a little bit. And so by the 9th grade, that summer slide accounts for something like 2/3 of the gap between 9th graders that are doing well and 9th graders that aren't.
That's amazing when you put it to that context, how much that can change. Now, in terms of this program, what specific areas are moving forward right now?
Well, we have working collaboratives with members from, as you've seen, over 70 different organizations, and cross-sector leadership from both sides of the river. This is pretty phenomenal in itself, that we have everyone working together. So we have these collaboratives working around kindergarten readiness, and really Stephanie's leading that work in her camp. And then we also have one for attendance, and I think what we're doing right now is trying to get a handle on what is out there. Where do we need to go? Where do we need to direct resources that are going to have the most impact? And then what sort of strategies and programs and initiatives can we replicate and bring to scale for everyone?
One of the areas that, just getting back to your earlier point about the summertime loss, that I think plays into the work that we're doing here with the campaign, is even looking at how some of the programs that have had some success in a limited area can be broadened to other districts. And an example of that is a program that's currently in place at Cincinnati Public Schools called Summer Bridge, very focused on identifying children who are finishing preschool, who will be entering kindergarten the following fall, late summer, but who are not on par with their peers on some of the preschool assessments that are used in language and literacy development. And doing some summer interventions, even with those children, by engaging them in activities over a 7-week period of time that help strengthen their reading skills, that are very targeted to language development, with a shared book experience, an activity around that book, and games that the child can use over the course of the summer to reinforce what they've learned in those sessions. So, that's worked tremendously in CPS. We think there's no reason it should be just a CPS product. How can we take similar kinds of programs and expand them to other districts where we know children are struggling with the same issues?
There's essentially 6 things that we're going to try to do over the course of the next 5 to 8 years. One is, focus on disadvantaged students, the students that we know are, if without the right interventions, aren't going to be where they need to be at the end of 3rd and 4th grade. That's one. 2 is this collaborative action around the key strategies, from kindergarten readiness to attendance to summer learning. The third piece is around building broad-based community will. It would be very difficult for any of us to continue to do the work that we are so passionate about if people throughout the community on both sides of the river don't say, this is a big issue, right? I mean, if we're going to have the most robust talent supply supply of talent in the country, we're going to have to get really focused here in investing in our own people, especially our young people. The fourth thing is, about bringing the districts together. I mean, combined, there are 19 districts. Some are high performing and some aren't. And how do we get them to share best practices and work together around this particular issue? The fifth thing is around data. I mean, we're very committed, all three of us, and the work that we're doing are committed to collecting, sharing, analyzing data to make sure that we are always getting better at this. And then finally, aligning funding to what works, scaling those things that we know are effective, like Summer Bridge, the Summer Bridge work at CPS and Born Learning Academies across the river. We know it works. And so how do we get more and more resources aligned to those efforts so that more and more kids are getting, are reaping the benefits of those efforts?
You know, I would want to add to that we looked initially at what was available for summer across our districts, and many of them had programs, but they've had to abandon them because of lack of funding. So that's a concern.
Greg, Stephanie, Polly, thank you so much for being with us today. A lot of great information.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Focus, a part of the American Graduate Initiative funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. To find out more about American Graduate and early learning resources, go to cincy-americangraduate.org. To watch this and other Focus episodes again on demand, you can do so at our website, cetconnect.org/focus. Thank you for watching. I'm Kathy Lehr, and we'll see you next time right here on Focus.
Tell us what you think about the programs we air, or let us know if you would like to see a particular topic on Focus. There are several ways you can contact us. You can send your comments by email to focus@cetconnect.org. You can call us at 513-345-6522. Or you can write to us at Focus, care of Andrew Dahman, 1223 Central Parkway, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45214. Any use or rebroadcast of this copyrighted program or portions thereof is prohibited without the expressed written approval of CET.